everyone, and welcome to In Conversation with FKM. Today, our special guest is Mmabatho Mokiti, who we'll be having a conversation with. She's a problem solver creating impactful business solutions to allow people to live their best possible lives. A mathematician who turns to an impact entrepreneur, and she focuses on the design and implementation of CSI strategies in STEM education and monitoring and evaluation of programs. She's been recognized as one of South Africa's top 200 by the Mail and Guardian in 2012 and as a millennial to watch in business by Forbes Africa Woman in 2017. She was also awarded an inspiring 50 Women in STEM in South Africa by the Dutch Embassy in South Africa. And with that, welcome, Mmabatho. I've had the pleasure of hearing you speak at other webinars, and the passion that you speak with is so inspirational. So I had to have you on this. Thank you for making the time and for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Fatima. I'm so excited to just chat to you and share as much of my knowledge with everyone.
Great. Well, with that, let us get started. And like I've said, where do I start? I think when I talk to you, when I hear you, the first thing that comes to my mind, as well as the first item that stuck with me till today when I first heard you speak, was the way you framed something. And you said you're a problem solver, creating solutions to allow people to live their best possible lives. I absolutely love how you frame this and the perspective that you highlight, because there's so many different ways of saying things, but for me this was so unique and so refreshing. How did it come to this, and why frame it in such a way versus the simple I'm an entrepreneur?
I think, well, for me, really, entrepreneurship has just been a journey of myself. And so with everything I do, I've always said that it has to be purpose driven. So, I mean, everyone gets into business for different reasons, right? And it really doesn't matter what reasons it is. But for me, personally, I got into business because I knew that it was my purpose and I wanted to change lives. So every single time I go into any new business, I always go back to that. It's almost like a motto I live by, right? I go back to that and I say to myself, is this aligned to my purpose in life? Is it going to allow others to live their best possible lives? And it's almost like a constant check-in. And I think it's so important as a business person to constantly have that, a life motto that you sort of live by when it comes to business. And it may be anything. Maybe yours is you want to I don't know, you want to be the richest young person, whatever it is. And every time then you engage into any business relationship, then you need to go back to that. But for me as an impact entrepreneur, it's always been about serving. So it's first serving and then the profit comes afterwards. But when you are in business when you're in business and you're doing something that you love, profit always follows. It's almost like, for me, it's a reaction of some sort, right? So when I find myself that I am completely at peace and in love with what I'm doing, that moment is when I know that I've tapped into my higher self, and then the money comes.
Yeah, and it's so true what you're saying. It's that purpose. And when you go into a business and you're creating a business, you're creating jobs. If you're not fulfilled internally by knowing what it is that your purpose, it sometimes flags in terms of what you're creating, because you don't know exactly what am I creating and for what purpose. And you may be creating for something and where your purpose is not cemented and it's varying, that you then see the business can even stumble, as well as from a leadership perspective where you're creating opportunities for people. And it's so important to clear that and to also own it. As you've said, if your intention is to make the money and make the riches, own it. Because you have so many people who are shy or afraid of owning it or saying, this is what I want to do. And then you see that they cover in with the service element or, making a difference element. But because they're not being true to themselves, it's why nothing really flows. And that stuck with me, and I wanted to highlight it because so many of us do things for such a variety of different reasons, and we don't own them at times deep down inside what it is that we want to achieve. And then we question, why am I not achieving, or why am I not obtaining this? And it's because you're not defining your purpose in the entire honesty of what it is that you want to do.
And I think what people don't realize that when you get into business, it's a relationship, right? So you are stuck with that business and you have to make it work. So essentially, it's a relationship that you have. And so the day you make a decision that I'm going to go into a business, that means you're going to walk with that business. It's going to be your partner, it's going to be your friend, it's going to be your child, it's going to be all of those things, right? And so once you've made that commitment, you can't go back. But you also want to make sure, like in any other relationship, that when you embark on this journey, you're embarking with something that you love
Yeah,
and that you
yeah,
enjoy being around. Because if you're going to be in a business that is not fulfilling you, it's going to show. It's going to show in the quality of work that you do. It's going to show in the way you show up. During business activities, it's going to show it with your team members and your staff, right? And you don't want to drop the ball like that.
yeah. Exactly. And entrepreneurship is a hot topic now, and everyone wants to do entrepreneurship, and everyone is doing side hustles, and everyone is seeing, and I think as millennials and as the generations after us come in, we've realized it's a variety of different things. But again, as you've highlighted, what is the purpose? Understand that it's a relationship, and even though it may be as a side hustle, it still needs that commitment, that time, that honesty, that you highlight, and I think it's also a trending thing, and it's a new thing that a lot of people are talking on. And you also mentioned being an impact entrepreneur, and you've explained in terms of purpose and how that ties in. Do you want to talk a bit more in terms of people who are tagging onto a trend saying I'm also an impact entrepreneur, but what does that actually mean?
And I mean, this is not the definition that's set in stone or in the dictionary, right? This is my definition because, after all, I'm telling my story. So, an impact entrepreneur for me is somebody who really their business is for the impact of others. It impacts other people. So, every time I go into any business deal or I have a project, at the end of the day, it should be changing someone's life. It should be impacting someone in some way or another, right? And so for me, is it whether it's in education? So if it's education, I work a lot in education, and education is disadvantaged in rural areas. And so for there, it's really just showing that just by investing in quality education, you can really break the cycle of poverty in most families. And that alone is impact because you have then changed the story of an entire family by investing in that person's education, right? So it may be now one of my businesses is working in the township economy and bringing e-commerce to the informal market. And just by doing that, we have then changed the narrative of that township store or that township business, right? And now it can trade in during COVID and during lockdown. And so now we've changed its future because at the beginning of lockdown, the store or this business was thinking, oh, I'm in a township, I can't do e-commerce, I'm not going to make it past the pandemic. And now we've changed the story and we've said, we'll introduce you into the market and you can start competing with the big retailers, because you're still catering your market and you're still catering your community.
Yeah, and it's so important that start because we all, in our higher selves want to be impact or social entrepreneurs as we call it. And a lot of the people that I work with, including myself on some instances, we want to make the social change. We have all these ideas. The key is, and none of us ever start, or we don't start because we wait for perfection or we're waiting for things to line up. How do
Exactly.
you just start?
And I think also just on the concept of impact, right? You don't have to be an entrepreneur to have impact. You could be an employee in a company or in a business, and you would want to make impact through the business that you work for, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that in order for you to go create great impact, you've got to go start off your own thing. And that's one thing I really have to highlight because everyone thinks that in order for them to make a great impact or to be recognized for the work that they do, they have to go off and start their own thing. And that's not true. We need to actually we need to stop thinking that way. We all have a role to play on this earth and a role to play in the changing of our communities and our country and our world, really. But it's all in different ways. And just because Batu has gone about it by starting a business when she was 18, it doesn't mean that everybody has to walk that path, right? And just on the note of starting something and finally starting, I was chatting to someone the other day and they're like, oh, they're waiting for it. They're still working on the business concept and the MVP and stuff. And I said, you know what, you need to just launch, right?
Yeah.
And I give the example of when at the beginning of lockdown, when myself and my business partner started Redshift, is that we knew we wanted to get into it. Lockdown came into play and we literally launched a product in 32 hours. We built it and we launched it. It wasn't perfect and it wasn't the perfect solution, but we knew that we had to take the plunge and launch, right? So we launched, and then a month later we refined the product and we launched 2.0 because we'd worked on the product, we'd worked on the platform, and now we were happy with it. But if we had waited for 2.0 to launch a month or 2 months later, it would have probably been too late, right? We wouldn't be able to get the traction that we got so quickly, get the funding that we got so quickly, get the partnerships that we got so quickly. But because we didn't wait to start something, I think one thing that the pandemics also made everyone realize that what if tomorrow doesn't come and you've been waiting for that day to launch? Nothing's ever been perfect. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. We as humans ourselves are not perfect. We are a work in progress, right? But we need to go for the things that we want to do, because if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. And then you're going to wake up and think, oh my word, I had that idea, but is anyone going to believe you? I don't think so.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for entrepreneurs like yourself even to share your stories, because sometimes so many things that we're taught, right, is in school, in campus, in doing assignments, in researching, everything needs to be done in these steps and it needs to be done in this way. You don't go to, and that is all changing. It's about unlearning and relearning, and it's about hearing those honest stories of those who have walked the journey to say, like you've said, it wasn't perfect. We reiterated, but we knew that we had to launch. And it's the same thing. And the message that I want to get across to everyone is whatever it may be, launch it, reiterate. There's no problems with having those upgrades done at a certain point. And that doesn't define that it was a failure or it wasn't market ready. But if you don't take that step, you may never, and other people will be doing it, and you'll find yourself making excuses at so many different times. And what you mentioned in terms of wanting to be an impact where we feel it's only entrepreneurs, if I look at my journey, professional turned entrepreneur, went back to being a professional. And the reason is it's because I found what my purpose was. And I realized that through entrepreneurship, it's great, it's amazing, I love it, I really do, and I want to support entrepreneurs, but it didn't serve my inner purpose that I needed. And I couldn't make the impact that I wanted, whereas I am able to do that through my professional life. Exactly. And correct.
People don't understand it. I mean, Fatima, I'll go back to like my very early days of entrepreneurship, right? So I've been an entrepreneur for what now? About 18 years. So I started a business in my late 20s. It was a tutoring company, and what we did is we offered. So I was a university student, and I realized that there was a gap in the market where a lot of the students were going to centers to get sessions, and I thought, how about I employ my classmates and other science students in other universities to go out to these students' homes and then tutor them in their own time, and that's really how I launched Mathemaniacs then. But after doing that for about, I think, 3 years or 4 years, I realized that, you know what, I wasn't getting the impact that I wanted. The our clients were the same kids who really were going to all your private schools and could really afford these services, and that I knew that my calling was not really to serve that market. My calling was to serve the underserved and the disadvantaged. And so that's I also realized that I had a plan when I went to business, and I had these huge profit margins that I wanted to make. But I also realized that if I was still running that business, in order to get those profit margins, my business would have to be very operational heavy. So I would have to have a full-on team in the office taking care of operations and bookings and etc. And I knew that that's not the business I wanted to run. I travel a lot. I have a balance in my life. I have a balance between my personal and my career, right? And I've always believed in that. And I knew that if that was the business I was going to run for the rest of my life, it wouldn't allow me to do all the things that I love doing, right? So I then decided that actually, if I want to have huge impact, both in the numbers that I reached and also both in the profits that I made, I had to change my business model. So then I changed my business model, sorry, and I started working with corporates. And that's how I got into CSI strategy development, because I realized that if I could design a strategy a CSI strategy for corporates, it could target thousands, even millions, if that was the case, right? And high impact. In that way, I'd be then fulfilling myself to my fullest potential.
Yes, and exactly the evolution and the realizing and the realignment at every point to your purpose will help you to drive and realize that. I had a look at your website, and I'm on this journey about branding and myself, and let me admit to you already, just the mere thought of having to on your website, different packages, and we can help you do your website, and minimal input with this tool. And when I saw that, I'm like, gosh, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm in finance. It scares me, Mmabatho, and it looks so simple and easy, but I won't go ahead and press because I'm like, technology, doing websites, me, I don't see how it all works. And I wanted to ask that because there may be so many others like me where we want to create these things, we want to develop, I want to build my brand, but that becomes a stumbling block because I don't know it. I've always been taught, if it's so easy, is it really worth it? And I thought I have you on here, and I couldn't let the opportunity go to answer that. So how does it really work with that? And is it really that simple that someone like me can actually do it?
So web design is, well, on the Redshift platform, is very simple, right? But we also recognize as Redshift that not everyone has, one, the time, two, the patience, three, possibly the skills, or I think some people kind of know how to use your computer for what it needs to be, like emails and sort of doing what documents you need to do, right? And so that's when we came up with Business in a Box program, which is where we actually trained unemployed youth and people on web development skills, and then they can go out and start their own digital agencies and service people like Fatima, where you say to that young person who now has the skills and time to do to build your site, to say, okay, I need a site, this is what I do, and they can then sit down with you, or and then advise you and say, okay, Fatima, I see that your brand is going in this way and that way. Let me build your site, and then let me know how it goes. And really, for a young person to be able to then do that in a day, and you have your website running, it saves you the time, right? But we also know every time you start a business, the classic question is a website. The website is the new business card. Everyone always asks you, do you have a website that I can check out? And if you say no, then it's like, they're a bit skeptical on whether you really exist, right? But, and also, starting a budget for website, that's what I want to say. The budget for website is so expensive. Back then, when I started business, and I went around and I asked questions around how much it's going to cost me to get a website, and I got the most exorbitant quotes, and I thought, oh, I can't afford this. And so, but if you have a young person who's doing this and can really produce a product in a day, they can charge you a price that you can afford as a startup. And that's really, and I think that's why we developed Redshift. It's one, to give access to small businesses, to give them online access and digital access, right? But secondly, to also then empower unemployed people in order to start their own digital agencies. And we know a lot of people have lost their jobs during this time, and we've actually seen people start new careers through Redshift, who are now web developers and who have employed other people to work under their digital agencies. And these are people who never would have thought last year that they would start a new career. And I'm talking about people in their 20s all the way to their 60s.
Yeah, and that is just the amazing thing, and it also makes it easier, it's affordable. I know I'm making a difference and an impact in my way, even as a professional, through utilizing these platforms that meet my need and at the same time is helping. And I was really, really amazed. And like I've said, the prices there were really very reasonable. I've done shopping around, as you mentioned, and sometimes the quotes I get, I'm like, oh gosh, no, I'll just stick to doing whatever I am doing without the website, because it's not really that cost effective on certain instances just to do that for a startup or building a brand. But this platform, when I saw, I was like, okay, I can afford that. I can definitely manage it. And now to even know the story behind it and how the impact it will be creating, it makes it even more useful. So thank you for clarifying that. And I think that will lead me to my next question. And I know it was something that you've also said in one of the webinars that I've attended where you were talking. I'm in finance. I know technology is coming. I know there's artificial intelligence and robotics, and to a certain extent, it scared me a bit. But when I look at my day, the repetitive tasks that can be automated, I would love for someone to take that on so I can focus on the business partnering element, which is really what I enjoy. So I'm starting to say, this is the future. This is here. It's coming. But literature, I know my mathematics, that helps me from an accounting perspective, not a mathematician. I've had friends who are in finance that are studying AI and robotics, and it's technical, it's highly technical. What would you suggest for someone like us who know we want to embrace it, but we also want to learn a bit more? Not high level, not to get a degree and not to go and build these things, but to be able to help me to understand what's coming into my space and learn a bit more, to be able to converse a bit more. It's becoming a hot topic, to also be able to give value for my stakeholders when I engage with them. Is there any tools or tips or recommendations that you can give us?
I think where I want to start firstly is just around the whole 4IR and the introduction of it. And I think what's been misunderstood a lot when it comes to 4IR is that you have to have a science background to thrive in the fourth industrial revolution. And that's not true, right? The reason that's not true is because every single thing in the future will have an underlying element of technology or digital element, right? But it doesn't mean that it completely erases everything, right? And what we also need to realize is that everyone has a role to play within the 4IR. It doesn't matter what you do or what your career path is. You have a role to play. And the role that you can play and that you can take on is, how do I further equip myself to learn about my industry and where the 4IR is taking it? So for instance, you are in finance. So chances are you're thinking, okay, there'll probably be some sort of accounting package to half the time of what I do in the future, right? So you need to ask yourself, what is my role in all of that? Am I going to be part of the solution, or is the solution going to replace me?
Yeah.
Those are your two choices, right? And if I would advise you to be part of that solution, because as much as robots can do a lot of things, they can't replace humans.
Yeah.
They cannot replace humans. They cannot replace the human element of working with a person, right?
True.
And so you have to then think, how can I enhance my human abilities so that they work parallel with the 4R or with automation, right?
Yes.
And there's so many ways to do that. And I actually want to ask you this. Do you know that about 60% of Microsoft employees are not science graduates?
Wow. No, I didn't know that. Wow. Yeah.
Right? And everyone thinks, oh, but if you work for one of the largest tech companies in the world, surely you should have a science background. It's not true, because everyone has a role to play within a corporation. And there
Yeah.
will be things that robots or automation cannot replace.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I would say to myself, to people, just give them advice, start familiarizing yourself, one, with the language that comes with technology.
Mm-hmm.
So that when somebody says something like a bot, then you're like, what is a bot? Then you kind of can contribute and think, oh, okay, a bot, automation of having a chat with an automated chat. So it's all the little things. We have to start somewhere. I'm not expecting somebody tomorrow to wake up and they can code, because coding is not for everyone. right?
Yeah.
But start familiarizing yourself with the jargon and the language that comes with the 4IR, because then you are able to sit on more tables and be able to sit in more conversations, and then you're able to actually be part of that change.
Yes. And that is it. It's so vital. I love how you've summarized it. Well, how can I use technology to enhance my human abilities? Because that is in essence exactly what we have to change our mindset to and embrace. And either you will be part of it or you will be removed from it and it's still going to.
Exactly. And every single revolution that came into play replaced something. And everyone in the past, who, or our forefathers before us, were in this position. When the third industrial revolution started coming in, people thought, oh gosh, how's this going to come now with the introduction of a computer? Remember, that was just the first processor that came into play, the first CPU, right? And you had people who thought, oh gosh, how am I going to deal with this? Now I've got to put away my typewriter and learn how to use a computer. And not only does that come, but it comes with all the Microsoft packages, for instance, or whatever packages it comes with, right? Or the software. But with time, people caught onto it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure if you had conversations with your parents, for instance, or anyone who really has been working for anything between 30 and 40 years, they'll tell you that they started working pre-computers. And
Yes.
now they probably can't imagine their lives, without computers,
True.
you know.
I mean, on this topic, my kids, even just yesterday, they were asking me, but can you please tell us how was life without Wi-Fi? Like they can't comprehend something like
And
that.
I tend to think about Rafi for my cell phone, before having an Android cell phone, and even a cell phone just in general, and how I mean, you would have to call someone's landline, and if you didn't find them at home, tough, you'd have to try some other time, right? And sometimes you'd probably only find them around the 10th try or something like that. But now you can just pick up your phone and I can get in contact with you immediately, Fatima. And so is email in that way. But just to think that, when cell phones were introduced, in our years back in the 90s, we all thought, sure, I can't imagine carrying something with a phone with me everywhere I went. I thought to myself, how can I even carry a phone with me everywhere I go? Like, why? And how am I going to be talking to someone? And now I look back and I think I can't even live without my phone. I'm constantly on my phone. So
Correct.
it's all those little things that, everything has to change, because change brings in new opportunities. And that's how we embrace change. It's not meant to destroy anyone. It's meant to push us to our next level.
Correct. And I think this, we're talking on change, and change is a must for evolution and growth as we've discussed. But it can be painful, and it is painful. And I guess we tend to forget the pain because we're constantly changing. So initially, how have you managed to embrace it, and what would be your advice? Because there still are many skeptics, as much as we know and we see, but there are still, I think all the voices that are here are still so skeptical, and it goes with our human nature as such. With any big change, we go through, we complain, we embrace it, it's painful, and then we can't imagine life without it. But as we're going through it, how would you say to embrace that?
I think, Fatima, after having been an entrepreneur for so long, entrepreneurship comes with so much change. Nothing is ever stable in entrepreneurship. And that's the difference between that and being in corporate sector, right? Is that every day is a learning exercise for me in entrepreneurship. There's not a day where I put my head down to sleep at night and I think, wow, I've learned something new. From learning new skills to just learning new industries, and just constantly um feeding myself with information so that I can be a better version of myself, right? That's the only way you can overcome change. Is the only way to overcome change is for you to be willing to change yourself.
Yes.
And the only way to overcome change is to equip yourselves with the skills and knowledge in order to ride the wave of change. Because if you don't have the skills and knowledge for that, you will drown in the wave of change, literally, so to say, right? Because you're not equipped with the right skills. And we are fortunate to live in a time where everything is accessible through the device of the like through the internet. If you don't know something, you can quickly Google it, and now you know how to do it, right? You know, and so we need to actually take advantage of that, because every day comes with change, and entrepreneurship will do that to you. It will strip you away, and almost you almost have to unlearn everything in order to learn again.
True.
And it's a process you go through time and time and time again, because if you want to stay relevant, you constantly have to evolve, whether you've been business or corporate, because
Exactly.
there's always somebody new coming in, and they're gunning
True.
to be with.
And it also talks in terms of how we look at education and studying. And I'm busy reading something also where and it, you know, it reflected me. I believe that for me to be able to have learned anything, I need a degree, I need a certificate, or I need something to say Fatima has completed it. And what you're highlighting now even is it's simple. At the tap of your buttons, you can learn how to do it, learn a new skill. And we have to change that narrative, and we have to start changing that you don't need that.
We have to. It's about time we change the narrative of just our education system as a whole. Our education system is not working for our benefit. What it does, it teaches us that you have to go to school, get your matric, go to university, get your job, climb the corporate ladder in order to get your corner office, and then you get married, get into build a home, 2 point whatever, for whatever the number is now, the amount of kids, and you have that white picket fence. And what it also teaches us, that it teaches us that in order for you to have financial security, you have to work for someone.
Yes.
And so that is not true. That is not the way life should be. I think, our kids should be given the choice to make a decision on which path they want to take with their lives. And the way to start is through the education system. It should equip them with the knowledge to make those decisions. I mean, a few years ago, when I got into entrepreneurship, you got into entrepreneurship because you didn't have a choice. And when I made a choice to get into entrepreneurship, my mom couldn't believe it. She sat me down and she was like, okay, so I take you to good schools, you go to university, you get the stellar degree, and then you come back and tell me you want to start your own business. She just couldn't understand it, because for her, people started businesses if they didn't have a choice. In other words, they lost their jobs or when they were retired. And so, having been in my early 20s or whatever, 20, she thought, how can you make a decision that retired people make at 20? She didn't get it, right? And I think it also just goes to show that our education system should be changing. Entrepreneurship should be part of the curriculum.
Correct.
It should be something that is learned by everyone, whether you want to go work for corporate or go work for yourself, because you can use the skills of entrepreneurship in a corporate, and that we call an entrepreneur. Someone who's constantly thinking out of the box in a corporate and innovating within the corporate. Because at the end of the day, I have to also mention this. Not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur, but everyone is meant to innovate in the work they do.
Correct.
Right?
And a lot of professional jobs now, as you're saying, Mmabatho, even in my own role, they want someone with an entrepreneurial flair. Because of exactly what you're saying, is you need to be able to assess and impact and create and innovate and change. And that is what entrepreneurship is and means. And the education system, I mean, I've made a variety of different decisions for my kids' education, because I'm a firm believer like you. And a lot of people, including my mom, will sit me down and say, I don't understand, like, what is up with you? And it's because I said, I cannot educate my son the way you and I were educated for a world that is coming. I can't, They talk about gaming and gamers and online platforms and this virtual world. And my kids are telling me, just at dinner over the braai in the weekend, that mom, if you're fearful of certain things, my one son is scared of heights, and he's like, in a virtual reality setting, I can do it and I can experience it, and I don't need to do it in real life. He's 8 years old, and I'm like, are you serious? He's like, yes. And I am so proud, because I know that then I'm making the right choices to educate him for a world that he will be ready for.
And that's the thing exactly. If we want to groom future leaders, future innovators, if we want to groom young people who can put South Africa on the map when it comes to innovation, then we need to let them also learn by doing things. Whilst our education system is you study a textbook and you get tested on it, but there's very little application in our education system. So what happens is that we've got students who are graduating and now being thrown into the deep end of the corporate world, and they don't know how to do things because they're thinking, I didn't get taught to do this in varsity. My textbook never didn't teach me to do these things. And it's also that the one thing I also have to mention is that our education system also needs to include personal development. We have a lot of people walking around and they don't know who they are. We have a lot of people who don't know who they are. They don't know how to make their own personal decisions, but we expect them to make decisions for others and for our country.
Correct.
And that's very dangerous. So personal development also has to be included into the curriculum so that kids can start having open and vulnerable conversations with each other from a young age, so that they bring those skills and that vulnerability into their leadership, into leading later on in their lives.
Yes, it is so critical. My family is always amused by the conversations my kids have, because I have realized communication and talking and expressing how we're feeling, and when we're not comfortable and voicing, it's okay to be angry. Let's unpack it, is what I tell them, that my brother sometimes he comes here for the fun of it and he's like, your kids talk like no other kids. Like, it's so amusing to have a conversation with them, but it's precisely for this reason.
Because today's kids are very different in the way they think. I mean, I have a 3-year-old niece, and some of the things she says sometimes just blows me away, right? In fact, over the weekend we were out on a family road trip, and we all had ice cream, and then myself, my mom, and my sister said, oh, this ice cream isn't nice. We were just complaining that we're just not enjoying it, and then she just chirped in and said, I like it. Yeah. And I looked back at her and I laughed, because for me, it made me realize that it doesn't matter what anyone else says. If she likes it, her opinion is what matters.
Yes.
She doesn't have to follow the crowd. And the fact that she now knows it at 3.
Exactly.
To make sure that we embrace it and we encourage it in her. That she needs to have an opinion. She doesn't always have to agree with everyone. And her opinion needs to be heard, but in a way that's respectful to others.
Correct. And it starts by teaching them these skills. And whereas with adults, we don't. And on the communication, but it's so critical. In finance, we're taught about all these finance regulations. IFRS says this, IFRS says that. But I work with people, and when we audit, you must know it's different clients. No one taught me how to work with a difficult client. I can't just walk in and say, well, IFRS says this, so you're going to do that. Can you imagine how that will be? But we're not equipped.
See, exactly. And so the school system tends to focus a lot on IQ and very little on EQ. And we need to find a balance between the two quotients, because they both are just as important, right? And I mean, thinking when I was in school, it was all about IQ and what IQ number I was, what was my IQ rating back then, and I probably didn't even know about the EQ until varsity. In fact, yes, varsity, when I read the EQ quotient book. And I thought, oh, okay, what is this? Emotions, But we need to ensure that there's a balance between IQ and EQ, because they both are very important.
Very true. With that, I see you have a bookshelf behind you, and I'm a lover of books. So I'm going to ask if you could recommend one book, one from the ones that you've read that you feel is impactful and on your must-read list. What would you recommend?
So I'll recommend. Okay, I'm going to recommend 2, right? And I'll tell you why. The first book is a book that I read in my teens, and it changed my life forever. And it is actually one of the reasons why I am an entrepreneur today. So it's Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich.
Oh, I love that book. Yes, on my must-read list as well.
So I was a crazy teen who read it, and it just changed everything for me. And after I read that book, I knew that my financial freedom and my freedom as a whole in order for me to be happy with my own life, I needed, it was in my own hands. I was responsible for that. I was responsible for writing my own story, not Fatima, not my parents, not my teachers, but myself,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
The second one I'd recommend is the 4 agreements.
Okay.
I think it's Miguel Ruiz, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and that book is about the 4 agreements that you make with yourself.
Okay.
Because it's so important to make agreements with yourself before you can make agreements with anyone else. You know,
Yes.
and they've helped me a lot in life, whether it be business or just in my personal relationships. And I mean, one of the agreements is don't take anything personally.
Mm. So
Because some
true.
people do things and it's got nothing to do with you. Sometimes
Yes.
you don't get a contract and it's got nothing to do with you,
Yes.
right?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
another one of the agreements is always do your best. Excellence is my love language. Always do your best. It's
Correct.
about your best. It's not about Fatima's best, your parents' best, your friends' best, your teacher's best, whoever. It's your best. If you can go to bed at night and you can lay your head down and think, I have done my best, then you're all good with yourself.
True. And it's so vital. I haven't read that, but I'm gonna add it
It's
and
an
order
easy
it
read.
already to get
It's an
it.
easy read, and I read it annually, twice a year.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be. And I think with that, let me have received some questions from people that I think I'd like to, with some of the time that we have left, let's go through them and see. So the first one is from Talita Ferreira, and she asks, how will you appeal to all generations and help non-tech people to integrate and use services and products?
Um, and I think it also goes to what we touched on earlier, right? In that we have to start embracing technology. It's not a virus, and I mean, excuse the pun, because we are living in a pandemic with a virus going around. It's not a virus where oh, and actually and I would actually quite compare it to what COVID, where older people are like, oh, technology is not for me, you know it's a detriment to me, while younger people are most likely to embrace it. But technology is for everyone, and we all interact with technology at different points, right?
Yes.
Some people will interact with it on a light touch through your phone,
Mhm.
applications like WhatsApp and Facebook or whatever it may be. That's on the light touch. While other people will interact with it on a higher scale, and that's maybe through coding and software development and whatever. But it doesn't mean that we all have to be at that level. And I'll tell you this, that's why teams are so important, because then you rely on each other and on each other's strengths. So I look at our team at Redshift, right? So it's the three of us, myself, Doug, and John, right? Doug is the developer. He's
Mm.
brilliant at what he does,
Yeah.
right? So which means that John and myself don't have to develop. We have some
Yes.
knowledge on developing because we both John and myself have a science background as well. He's an engineer, he's a former engineer, and myself having a background in science, we know how to code, but it doesn't mean that we have to do it. We
Yes.
focus on the business side of the business and
Yes.
let that be what he does best, because he doesn't want to get involved with the business side. He doesn't want to interact with clients, you know and that's when you really realize that you need people to be great at what you do. You can't do everything on your own, and it doesn't mean that just because technology is coming in that you have to learn every single tech skill out there. No, you don't have to, but leverage on the people that do know how to do that and then contribute to that.
Yes. You've summed it so well. I love what you've said and the importance of the team element. Thank you. So the next one is from Piyush Rati, and he wants to know, and I think it's a great question. In the initial stages, as you're looking at launching, should your focus be on product development or advertising or hiring or finding paying clients? And I think this speaks so well to what you've done. And how do you decide? Because it can be so confusing. What would be your advice?
So I would say, first of all, you first have to find the market. In other words, you first have to, before you develop any business solution, there has to be a problem that you're solving. Because if you're not solving a problem, then you don't have a business, unfortunately, right? So you first have to identify the problem, and then you develop the solution, right? So you solve the problem, and
Yes.
developing the solution means the product, because you can't go out and advertise when you don't have a product. Because what are you advertising essentially, right? So once you have a product or you have a solution, then you can go out and advertise it, or start getting clients. And advertising and really clients are the same thing, right? Because there's different ways of getting clients. With regards to hiring, I always say that hire when you know that you can afford people.
True.
In the beginning of entrepreneurship, of you being an entrepreneur, of the entrepreneurial journey, you are everything. You are the accountant, you are the MD or CEO, you are the marketer, you are the salesperson, you are everything, especially if you are a sole proprietor. In other words, you don't have business partners. But even if you have business partners, I look at our relationship where the one business that I have business partners, we dabble between various roles, right?
True.
So, but because we've got to make things happen, and we've got things to meet, and we've got tasks to meet and objectives to meet.
True.
So I would always say, always look within first for skills before you go out and find skills.
Yes.
And when you have no choice but to find skills, for instance, if you're building an application, for instance, say, and you have tech background and you can't build, obviously then you need, we live in a world where there are so many people who give their services on a consultancy basis, freelancing. Look for
Yes.
freelancers. You don't have to employ anyone full time. In fact,
Exactly.
on most of our projects on Mythomaniacs, we get in freelancers. We don't have full-time employees. We employ as per project.
Correct. And
Because
it's going with how the times are going, and you're also impacting and helping socially around you, right? In terms of the need. And I love what you said because he even asked, do you go and find paying customers? If you're solving a problem, those paying customers will find their way to you because you're solving a problem. It's that perspective that you bring in, because then you don't need to go and find. If there's a problem, the customers will come to you because you're solving it.
and also, if you don't have customers, if you don't have to pay customers, then you don't have a business.
Yes.
I hate to break that down, but if you're not getting paid for what you do, then you don't have a business. And remember, I also need to also say this: in the very beginning of your business, sometimes you're putting you're investing into the business, and so you may not be generating a profit. So that doesn't mean that you should quit your business altogether. But if you know that at the end of the day you can sell that to someone, then you've got a business. But if you're going to be giving off your services for free forever and ever, then you have a problem.
Very true. We've spoken on change, and Alia Abdullah asks a really nice question. How do you continue to stay relevant with changes in consumer tastes and competition?
I get that question a lot of times. So, firstly, I didn't get into business to stay relevant. I got into business to be to constantly be solving problems.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get into stay relevant because I don't think relevancy. I don't know. I think the word relevant has really come out in the past few years. Hey, and I don't remember actually hearing the word relevant as much as I have heard it in the past year or two. As I in back 10 years ago, I didn't hear this word as much. I got into business to constantly be solving problems and coming up with solutions.
Exactly.
And because the world will always have problems, that means I'll always have a reason to stay in business. I'm,
Exactly.
I may be solving different problems at different stages of my life,
Yes.
which means I'll be starting different businesses at different stages. Then that's fine. But
Yes.
there'll always be a problem to solve, which means there'll always be a place for business. It
Correct.
doesn't necessarily mean that there'll always be a place for the same business all the way.
Mm-hmm.
Saying, like with everything, some businesses have to die with time, which opens up new opportunities for new businesses. I started off with a tutoring company. I don't have a tutoring company anymore. That business had to die for me to start another business.
I love your perspective on things, and like I'm saying, we're so stuck in learning and reiterating and regurgitating what we've learned and repetitive, and we don't want to talk about businesses dying or failing or reinvention and recreating, and it's the narrative of what we need to do right now, and it's so brilliantly put by you and through your own journey that you're sharing with us, that thank you.
And Fatima, I have to really tell you, a lot of companies really were not what they were today before a lot of things. For instance, before the Spanish flu, and Peugeot.
Yes.
Peugeot, before the Spanish flu, was not a car manufacturing company.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay.
It was during the Spanish flu that they then became a car manufacturing company because they started manufacturing parts.
I see. Interesting. You see, exactly. So Alia, I hope that helps. This is an interesting take, and I'm very, very keen to see how you're going to answer this one. And it comes from Uwais Asmal. And we spoke a bit. For how long are you willing to accept financial losses before pivoting? Another new word that has come about.
I think the pandemics has really made us use the word pivot a lot, right? So how long are you going to accept financial losses before you start pivoting? So I can't give you a timeline, right? Because every business is different. But when you come up with your business, you should put a timeline to your business, and you should know when is enough.
Yeah.
I can't tell you, 6 months. I don't know if it's going to be 6 months. Maybe it takes you 6 months to pilot your solution. And then build a case study in order to go start getting money and then selling it, right?
True. And it comes back to purpose. Like you said, if your purpose is making money, you're not going to accept any financial losses, right or wrong. You're going to have to ensure that when you go.
And starting a business for team is not easy. You should always go back to your why.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have a why or why you start a business, then you're going to quit.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people come to me and say, I was in business and I quit or something. And I'm like, okay, everyone's got a different reason for quitting. But you also have to know what your why is. It has to be more than money. Because the first few months of business, you do not make money. I'm sorry to say this. I'm sorry. If anything, probably Redshift is the only business that I've started that started generating money in less than a month.
Wow, look at that. Yes. And that's the hard cold truth, you see.
And also, but after how many attempts of me start, after I started how many businesses, So if anything, you've got to be in it for the long run.
Yes.
It's like a marathon.
Yes.
It is really like a marathon. You start off slowly, then you start building momentum, and then you get to a point where you are at your best.
True. I have one from Shalendra Sinzeri, and she wants to know, what are the best platforms that bring together both technology and a chance for human interaction? And how far do you see AI going?
So platforms that bring both technology and human interaction. I think, if human interaction can be broad, right? Because social media is human interaction over technology.
Yes.
We are currently on like Teams, which is human interaction, but we're having a meeting, right? It's different from Facebook. It's different from Instagram, but it's also a human interaction, right? So you've got to find the platform that best works for you. And because I don't know it is her, right? Because I don't know what her business does or what type of interaction she wants to do, I can't advise. It depends. So if it's more for interaction on a social level, there's a lot of social media for that, right? But now what's happened is that also some social media platforms have started integrating a business concept, right? 2 months ago, Facebook came out and said, Oh, they're going to also integrate AI shopping into their platform, where you could actually walk into a Facebook like store, online store, and you could then fit a pair of glasses or test a lipstick, for instance, but virtually or using AI. So then before you can purchase glasses online, then you know whether they suit you or not, or even before purchasing a lipstick. And I mean, we as women know that you have to get the right shade, or else you're stuck with the shade that you don't like, right? And when Facebook announced that, it just goes to show how they've gone into the next level of social interaction, because they've brought it into everyday living, which is shopping.
Yes. And I guess the space will evolve, and as we become even more comfortable with technology, and as technology companies and even Facebook and whoever else understands consumer needs and problems that are forever being created and recreated, we will see how that comes. And I guess, yes, that is what we have time for. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope the others do. I love your perspectives and how you frame things, and how you challenge things, and it's so refreshing to hear. So I want to thank you again. Any closing remarks from you? And yeah, thank you.
I think my closing remarks would be, um, there's always a need for something. Just going through the pandemic, and how people are just like, oh, COVID's just brought on problems. It's how you look at it. It's whether you're looking at it through a rosy pair of glasses, or whether you're looking at it at a magnifying glass, and you are then nitpicking the problems, right? But for every problem, there's a solution. It's up to you whether you want to be one, the problem solver, or two, the guy that sits on the side and just cries about all the problems.
Exactly.
You have that decision to make. And I'd like to really say to everyone, be the problem solver. Be the person who's part of the solution in creating a better South Africa, a better world, a better Africa. Because if anything, we are creating this better for the next generation.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Mmabatho. And with that, it has been great chatting to you.
Thanks, Fatima.